In this module, Module 7, we will focus on the end in mind, the end game, which is the Step 5 requirements of OECD, public reporting of due diligence by the smelter, and the verification that's required. And this applies to all companies, which we will discuss, and also what to be included in the smelter report with regards to conflict-affected high-risk areas, CARAs, and the use of joint initiatives in public reporting. The smelter due diligence report is the culmination of their efforts with regards to due diligence that's communicated in the report. And that should obviously be backed by evidence that's audited and verified by the auditor to ascertain the report's truthfulness and accuracy. As mentioned in the previous module, the smelter's due diligence report should be obtained in advance of the audit as per the list of information required to supply. Ultimately, Step 5 is supposed to be the end game and the culmination of the efforts made by the smelter to comply with the OECD due diligence requirements. And the report may be in the public domain or is intended to be put in the public domain after the audit's taken place. So the auditor is effectively working backwards, looking at the content of the report and ascertaining whether that's truthful and verifiable. Well, it needs to be clear that the smelter's due diligence report, step 5, should not exclude any mineral sourcing or key activities of the smelter. So the smelter's due diligence report should match the planned scope of the audit. For example, it shouldn't exclude secondary materials entirely, even though secondary materials are applicable to the smelter, or exclude in-country mineral sourcing, for example, or a particular country, or perhaps 3 months or a couple of months of the first year where the audit is taking place or applies to the year of mineral sourcing. If the smelter's due diligence report excludes one aspect for unforeseen reasons, such as key persons were not able to verify say, communication processes with regards to immediate suppliers, that must be stated in the report as limitations. Now, the limitations should not prohibit the viability and the validity of the entire work being conducted. It only applies to minor aspects that couldn't be verified and should not affect the overall conclusion of the work conducted. The ITA code and the OECD due diligence guidance places a reliance on actual mineral material sourcing and the evidence that can be gathered to demonstrate that through effective and established management systems. That's the controls of the smelter. So the audit's not exclusively a management system audit or a data-driven exercise. It's essentially a combination of both data and verification and management systems verification. This means that the smelter should, with regards to information that they put in their Step 5 report, include these 6 elements here on the slide, and it should be communicated in the smelter's due diligence report clearly and unambiguously. In addition to the smelter publicly disclosing in their smelter due diligence Step 5 report about the management systems, it should also disclose whether an aligned UGI, Universal Joint Initiative, is used or not, and if the audit reports of that are publicly available or not. The UGI is an important element, and the smelter should explain how it uses the UGI and how the audit reports related to the UGI are used by the smelter in conducting due diligence, or if any additional due diligence is required based on the smelter's use of those reports. If the smelter is sourcing from a conflict-affected and high-risk area, a CARA, then the smelter's due diligence report should describe all of these points listed here in this slide. That means a description of the chain of custody and traceability processes or system, the disclosure arrangements, a policy supporting the principles of EITI, an evaluation of the EITI implementation within their supply chain, and CARAs that are also EITI countries. Importantly, and not to be overlooked, the risk assessment methodology, results and supply chain management plan, the on-the-ground assessment methodology, practices and results, and the risk management strategy, plans and capacity building arrangements, and also the tracking and monitoring of performance. So all of those 8 points must be contained and publicly disclosed in the smelter's due diligence report with regards to CARAs. Obviously, that's not applicable if they are not sourcing from CARAs. Well, that concludes Module 7, End in Mind, the end game, which is the smelter's due diligence report that needs to be publicly available and what it must include. For further information, you can look at the ITA checklist and, of course, run through these slides again to ensure that you're familiar with what's required in the smelter's due diligence report.